when we're thinking about this sort of like org chart of the company, I built out a sort of marketing department ideal plan, right? And I see it every single day on my whiteboard. I look at it every single day. And I would love nothing more than to accomplish it. Yeah. But I know that like I have to just cool my jets.
Yeah.
But I know I do because I've made some poor decisions over the last 3 years that we've been in business in hiring people because I thought they were great, but I didn't spend enough time doing the diligence. I mean, I think at this point, like I'm the first to hold myself accountable for fucking up, I'm not going to like get kicked in the teeth for every one of these decisions because the truth is that like sometimes things just don't work out for reasons that you could have never ever seen.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
All right, y'all. Back in the saddle with my brother from another, Johnny Yarmeisch. Johnny, say what up.
What's up? What's going on? We're back.
This is Creatures of Habit. What's really happening? We missed last month. We did not do an episode last month. And so we knew that we had to get one in this month because we get great feedback about this series that we're doing here. So if you have not listened to a Creatures of Habit, What's Really Happening episode, what it is Jonathan and I, co-founders at Creatures of Habit, come together and blast open the doors of our business, Creatures of Habit. We talk about the good, the bad, the better, and the ugly. All of it. Everything. No fear. Full transparency. We want to take you guys on the ride with us. And so we've got a few updates to talk about this week. And that's what we're going to do. So why don't we just hop on in, JY?
Yeah. So we're pretty much wrapping up everything with Q2, which was kind of similar to last year in terms of the way like the seasonality hit the business. But it does feel like we're just in a very different place than last year, which is largely true, I think, from like a personnel standpoint, and then also just the contribution margin and profitability of the business. And so right now we're up like 15% year over year in revenues. And our actual, I know we were profitable in March, but for the most part, we have not operated profitably, but our net loss is 75% better year over year. Right. So you can see like there's not a direct correlation necessarily between the growth in revenue and the profitability, but the things that we're doing within the overhead of the business are we're tapping into those efficiencies still. And I think that's where we're trying to position ourselves for the second half of the year, which should be big for us with what we've got going on now with Prime Day. And then depending on when this airs, we'll have our one of two sales for the year on August 2nd for your sobriety date.
Yeah, man. And, you and I had a really good powwow last night. And we talked about a bunch of shit, right? We talked about, the sales have been good at Creatures, which is awesome. And I think it's a direct correlation to the Rich Roll podcast and to a couple of things that we've worked on, reformulation. And, we went through a little bit of a snafu in the reformulation with one of the flavors. The other stuff that we talked about that really I thought a lot about last night was this culture component. And I thought, you brought it up to me at dinner and, you had mentioned something that spawned you to actually want to put full transparency. You didn't ask me about having dinner last night. You put it on my calendar. And that for me was like, oh shit, something's up, because normally that doesn't happen. But it was really just you wanting to have dinner with me, which was great. I suffer from PTSD from a lot of shit in my life, and so when somebody does something like that, I'm like, oh man, this has got to be bad news. But it was not bad news. It was really just like, hey, let's catch up and really talk about where we're at and where we're going, and it was great. Culture is something that I think I spoke about in the Rich Roll podcast. That means a lot to me. And the reason why culture means so much to me is because I feel like I thrive in chaos, but I die with negative people. Like, people for me are like my lifeline. The proximity to people for me is so important in my life. And not that I don't enjoy alone time, because I do, but I really thrive when I get to be around people. And if the people that I'm around are not positive people, like I'm like kind of dead in the water. I don't perform well with negative people around me. And that's why you and I work so well, because you are really, really strategic. And I don't know if it's something that you actually think about or it's something that you're just sort of inherently good at, but like delivering bad news or when things are not going super well, you're precautious with me because you know me, but like you're so good at saying, hey, like this is not going great. We need to do something about this. And last year we were both in a really tough spot with raising cash. And right now we're in a very stable position financially, which is great. But back to culture, it's very, very difficult in my opinion, and you might have a little bit of a different thought about it, but like for me, I like to be close to people. I want to be able to look at you and touch you, right? That's why I've chosen to not do any virtual Creatures of Habit podcasts, because the culture of just us sitting here together is, something that you can describe, right? And I think what culture is it defines a group of people. Culture is what defines a group of people. How they celebrate, what they eat, the music, the dance, the mourning, like it really is every component of what defines a group of people is the culture. And it's very easy to create culture in the world of restaurants, right? Like every restaurant for the most part has, it requires a group of people, right? And for me, most of the restaurants that I opened, every restaurant had somewhere between 30 and 75 people working in them. And so it was very easy for me to walk in front of this group of people and develop the culture that I believe to be the best, which is a culture of positivity.
And in that scenario, were the cultures consistent in each restaurant, or did the people kind of create slightly different cultures? Like maybe from a customer experience, probably was uniform throughout. But I guess like when I think of culture, I think about what's happening in the kitchen, not necessarily from the customer side, because you're like in the trenches together serving people.
Yeah, so culture for me definitely is way more about the team, right?
Yeah.
It's way more about the team. And of course, there's different personalities, different people think differently. So there's always going to be sort of nuanced culture amongst a group of people. But ultimately, the idea for me was to, and the reason why I say this is because I grew up in a tough home, right? Mm-hmm. And like I hated feeling belittled. I hated when I got yelled at. I hated being told no all the time. And there's definitely there's a residual sort of me being told no I hate in my life.
Yeah.
And so I made it my job to create a culture of positivity and encouragement and support and like for me in the restaurants, I knew that if I couldn't get people excited about learning the wines, because that's hard, right? Not everybody's passionate about wine or beverage or even the food that we were serving. Like if I couldn't get them excited about that, I knew that I can get them excited to come to work because the environment was positive and awesome. And so that was ultimately the goal for me, right? Create an environment where they saw the owner of the restaurant. Like I would look people in the eyes and ask them how they were doing all the time. And I would care about the people. And that's like a lot harder to do when you're a team of 4 and you guys meet a couple times a week. Even though you and I spend half of our day talking to each other, it's just different. It's just different. And so you brought up this culture thing with me last night, and I thought a lot about it. I actually had a hard time sleeping last night. And I don't know if it was because of our conversation, but it definitely makes me want to like I would love tomorrow to like just take an office in the city and be able to come down here Tuesday mornings and leave on Thursday nights and spend 3 days with you in the office. And then ultimately, begin to build a team around that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think what happens too is like, if I think about the transition that we're kind of in the midst of trying to make is like, we focused heavily on stability and now we're really thinking a lot about scalability. And I would venture to say that and I think I actually got this feedback from someone recently in as a consumer of podcasts, but like most podcasts when they talk about scalability are talking in terms of like P&L and customer acquisition, right? There's really not a lot of people talking about culture. And I can understand from an entertainment standpoint, it might not be as interesting when you're not in it, but it's arguably the most important thing and the hardest thing. And it's easier when there's less people, right? Because there's less personalities in the room and you know, kind of, there's nobody else coming. So you kind of just know like it's all hands on deck, but you need to increase the bandwidth of the team, which we've talked about in the past too. And that comes with not only professional skill sets, but also just personalities. I think one of the things that we don't have to drill too far into, like, it always intrigues me because I've never had the experience in a restaurant. Like, my dad owned a small deli, so like I kind of understood the camaraderie of being there and what that was like. Very different than sitting behind a computer for the most part, or sitting in like a corporate office. But one of the things that you said about specifically about wines, right? Like someone working there might not care about the wine lists, but you kind of have to create a situation where they almost forget they don't care about that because they care about something bigger, right? And something that we've talked about a lot and talked about again last night is recruitment and how that's so hard. And I almost don't even have like a coherent like punchline to this other than what's more important of like hiring someone who knows everything about wines or hiring someone who you can convince to care about the wines, right? Like what's better long-term for the team?
So I have to interject there because there's no doubt about it that finding the right people to mold, in my experience as a business owner, is far more fruitful than hiring somebody who is set in their ways and knows everything, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe their knowledge, I mean, obviously experience is awesome, right? But if they're not willing to bend in any way because they've done it for so long and they know what works and what doesn't, it's a lot harder to sort of develop someone at that level. There is also now the double-edged sword though with, I do believe, and I could be wrong, I could be making a generalization, but you know, don't assassinate me for this, but the younger generation is not willing to, at large, is not willing to work the way I knew I had to work in my 20s to get to where I'm at today.
Yeah, so you asked me last night, I said I was going to send a position that we've been talking about to someone. And in the younger generation, I actually asked them this morning. And the response was, oh, I had a friend that actually was somewhat interested, but looked at the job description and was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. Right? And I was like, yeah, we're just trying to scale a small business.
I got introduced to somebody recently who was like 25 and for that position. And someone said, oh, I'm going to introduce you to this person, smart, like understands the space, all, you know. And legitimately the response from that email introduction, the person replied just to me. The only question was, what is the salary for this role?
Yeah.
And my response to that person was, thank you so much. This is not going to work. And so, like, I do believe that there is a misconception in the younger generation right now in two ways. A, what it's going to take in terms of like work, and B, the comp for those. Like, even early days, I remember we had somebody that we were working with who was 24, never had a real job ever. And I gave this person like a real opportunity. And I actually love this guy. So if he hears this podcast, he probably knows I'm talking about him. But this would be a good smile that maybe he'll appreciate now. Not only did I give him like a great salary of $75,000 for the role, but I also gave him an opportunity to earn into equity in the business. And he asked me if I was serious. And I was like, dude, I'm so serious. And he said, I won't take a job for anything under $100,000.
Yeah.
And my response was, dude, you've never had a job, like a real job, in your life.
Yeah.
Good luck, you know? What do you think it is?
I think social media plays a big role because I think a lot of what you're fed is a lot of lifestyles that may or may not be legitimate in what people are promoting. And it's a lot of,
Get rich quick stuff.
yeah, like I know that the phrase people use is like hustle porn, right? And I do think there is some merit in that like if someone finds motivation to do better for themselves in something that whether or not it's real or not, right? Like it's a North Star for them and that convinces them to do better for themselves. So that's great. Like we put out a ton of motivational content as a brand and you specifically. And like there's a bunch of people that it resonates with. Even like the Thursday emails that you send, people respond. They like hearing it. Other people might be like, I don't understand why he thinks that I should care about this, right? And I think that plays a role because I think I don't know why there's necessarily a gap between understanding if I want that kind of lifestyle that I might have to work for it. I don't know where that necessarily comes from. I mean, Joe Rogan always has said this thing of like, hard times make hard people make soft times make soft people, right? And it kind of just becomes this cycle, right? And so what I'm interested to see, like this isn't an answer as much as like a kind of a viewer of society, right? I'm just interested to see what happens kind of going forward with, it seems like things in general are starting to tighten up and cool off. I don't think that wage growth is happening as fast as it has been. And then I was reading earlier today that there's been like 364, I believe, bankruptcy filings this year in the first half of 24. And the record for bankruptcy filings in a year was in 2010. And it was, I think, 476, right? So we're well on our way towards businesses struggling throughout the remainder of the year. 75% of them were in the consumer discretionary space. And that includes restaurants, right? And so that's something that like, and I think we actually talked about this a while ago about how I think the winners of quote unquote winners, which we've talked about winning before, but I think the people that can understand their business model and navigate the harder times, if they can come out of this year, will be in a position to really succeed thereafter. But my point when it comes back to talent is if you start to see kind of all these places like around you that no longer are in business or anything like that, you kind of have like nothing to then spend your discretionary money on. And I think it almost devalues then the compensation a little bit. Like you kind of lean into the experience of working because it's like, what am I going to do? There's that old thing of like happiness doesn't increase over $85,000 in salary, and I think you'll get some younger people that come to the realization of like the number can change slightly and it's not really going to change the fact on the day to day you might not enjoy what you're doing. And so hopefully there is somewhat of a paradigm shift of talent, because the saddest thing to me is that one of the major themes I hear listening to business stuff is offshoring, and a lot of people taking talent to the Philippines, less expensive, almost as good in quality. And that kind of correlates as well with people not feeling like the education system in the States is as like prestigious as it was. Like that's sad to me because to our point about culture, you're now like committing fully to a remote world for the sake of the P&L, and that's not as fun.
Yeah,
it's just not.
So I guess anybody listening who's hungry and young and wants to change this dynamic, give us a buzz, shoot us a DM, let us know. We're looking to expand the team because we would love to build a larger team so that we can execute in a more efficient way and not feel like the two of us have to really. Not just the two of us. That's actually inaccurate. The four of us that are on the squad right now, like, could it's funny. Some investors will say, "Dude, stay lean, man. Stay lean and mean. Stay lean and mean." And I'm like, "We are. Like, A, we got no choice, but B, we are. We're lean and mean, right?
Yeah.
We've built a pretty cool business that is definitely like in the seven figures. Like well into the seven figures on a small crew." Super small crew. I can only imagine that if we were to go from like 4 to 10 people, what we'd be capable of, right? And so another thing that you mentioned last night, which is good for me to hear, and funny enough, I didn't even say this to you, but on my 7-year sober anniversary in August of 2011, I got a tattoo with another sober guy, and we both got a tattoo that says "slow is fast." And I have it right here on my ribs.
Is it visible for you?
What?
Is it visible for you? Because sometimes
I
don't know that you remember it.
Yeah. So you're right. So last night, you had sort of made it very clear, like, you brought up patterns and things that you pay attention to, and you're a very observant guy. And you were like, yo, man, like some of the things that we've done and that like I'm looking down the barrel of us doing again right now are sort of moving too quickly. And I definitely feel compelled to want to move faster. It's just, I guess, my nature to want to like move faster. And I don't think that you think that that's wrong, but based on some of the decisions that we've made and the mistakes that we've made, you've sort of pointed to that as a potential catalyst to those decisions and to those mistakes. And I agree with you, right? Like, I definitely like to, and I think kind of almost a characteristic of a lot of CEOs or entrepreneurs is this sort of like ability to make fast decisions and not be afraid of that, right? And I think that that is definitely something that I have. And I really appreciate you mentioning that to me last night because, not that we're like gunning for this like super flashy top line business that, is burning and begging, right? Like that burn and beg philosophy, I think is over. And when I say burn and beg, I mean like burn a ton of money every month and then beg for more when you're tapped out, right? And I think a lot of CPG specific businesses did that for a long time, and I don't think that that's something that's happening quite as much or nearly as much.
Well, I think they're kind of meeting their maker right now.
Yeah. With what you said about slow is fast, I need to just wrap my head around that, right? Because I have this, we had created this sort of, and I should also preface this by saying, like, planning is important for sure, but just be prepared for roadblocks. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And if you're not flexible, the chances of frustration and manifestation of negativity, are going to be prevalent, right? And so I had this vision for the gross sales for the year being in the 5 to 6 arena, right? Like, and my thought was, we're launching this protein bar. We're going to launch the protein bar in October. We're going to have, 3 months of like heavy protein bar sales and, really sort of like increase sales in Q4 in a real way. And the bar is taking way longer, right? And the bar is taking way longer. And
as everything
does. As everything does. And sometimes I need to be reminded of that, right? Like we had created this full plan for the bar and it's just not happening. And chances are it's not happening because of me. I'm very, very specific about what I want for this thing. And you said to me as well last night, like, yo, dude, you're not going to get it all. Like you're just, it's obvious.
Yeah.
You're not going to get every single thing you want.
Yeah. I mean, you can get everything that you want, more so that like you can't please everyone because everyone's going to want something different, right? So you kind of have to pick a cohort of people and I think you as an individual are in the cohort that we target. And so I think the brand is better off if you get what you want, but I don't think you can try to please, XYZ cohorts of people because you're just going to get caught in the middle. You don't have any identity with the product when you do that.
I mean, the goal with the bar, right? If we're talking about the bar, the goal of the bar is very simple. The goal is I want a protein bar from Kreatures of Habit that is super clean, that you don't have to worry about ingredients that are in it that are, whatever, not great, high protein content, and not, super high calories.
Yeah.
And so those 4 things are totally contradictory of each other, right? Like it's very difficult to get that because, the ingredients that you would use to bring down the caloric density of a protein bar are typically not the clean ingredients, right? And that's why you can see protein bars with, 20 grams of protein potentially on the shelf that are 190 to 210 calories, right? But then you look at the ingredient stack and you're like, what the fuck? I need a thesaurus or a scientist to help me figure out what these things are.
Yeah. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but plant-based as well. But that's another thing, that this is plant-based. There could be whey in the future, but like that's another variable in terms of getting the taste right.
So there's a lot of things. And I'm like super, but I will say this, and this is another thing that we talked about last night, which is most people want to get the job. So they're going to say yes. And I have done it both ways, where in the bar situation,
Yeah.
I was incredibly clear about exactly what I wanted. I said, I want a protein bar that's between 220 and 240 calories, 20 grams of protein, 20 to 25 grams of carbohydrates, 10 grams of fat, 10 grams of fiber. That's what I want. And all clean ingredients. And I got hit with a, absolutely, dude, got you.
Yeah.
This is going to be easy for us. And so when we started down the path, it's not as easy as it was portrayed, right? And so again, like, a lot of people want to say yes for the job. And that is why I have changed the way I like to hire people and give them an opportunity to write their own job description. And you're like, yo, dude, you give someone an opportunity to write their job description, they want the job. So they're going to go above and beyond, and they're going to write all this shit that they're going to do.
Yeah.
And chances are they're going to fall short of that thing. And you're right. You're right.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe not. Or maybe not. But like, in the restaurant business, I never gave anybody an opportunity to write their job description at all. Because I was just like, no. Like, this is what we need. All these things, this is exactly what the job requires.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in on the fast and slow.
Yeah.
What's the tattoo again?
Slow is fast.
Slow is fast. It's funny because whenever I think about Christian Harris's gym, move fast, lift heavy, I always think that, like, especially within CrossFit, he's missing the start slow, because, like, you actually can't just go in there and move fast, lift heavy, or you're screwed. You know. I think that there's levels to when it makes sense to go to 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I think so. There's a book, The Lean Startup. A lot of the rhetoric in there is like, push out the minimum viable product as fast as possible because you're going to get feedback as fast as possible. I think in software that's easier, and that's where, like, for the website, for example, right? If you said to me, like, hey, we should test changing that image on the homepage or changing what that button says, I would be like, okay, go. You know, like, I wouldn't be like, let's deliberate over that. You could always change it back and whatever. But when it comes to things like product, there's so many people involved and it's so process oriented. And ultimately, in a consumable business as well, like, it's something that someone's going to put in their mouth, right? And that's where I think moving slow actually gets you to the right place faster. And I always equate it. I think the analogy that has always, and I forget where it was at one point that I, like, drew this on a whiteboard, right? But if we're in New York and our goal is to get to California, right? There's so many variables that will take place from there. So you'd start to stack out the team, which would be like, okay, you're responsible for navigation. Like, you're responsible for knowing where all the mechanics are. You're responsible for mapping out where we're going to stop for food, right? I'm going to drive, all those things. If we get to a certain point and you're like, check engine lights on, but, like, let's keep going. Like, we got to get there. Yeah, we're going to get a little further and then we're screwed, like, halfway through the drive, right? And so to me, that's just, like, the easiest simplification of business is, like, you need people there that have a purpose in getting you to where you want to go, and you need to respect their purpose for being there, right? And, like, just go slow. Sometimes it might make sense to take a rest stop so that you can get a night's sleep so that you can drive further tomorrow. It's not going to feel like you're going as fast, but, like, in the long run, you will get there faster.
Yeah, you're right. There's no doubt. And slow is fast. I mean, it's a term for a reason, right? I mean, I didn't come up with it. I didn't make it up. And so I guess just to sort of, like, put a cap on that, what that made me really think about is, like, hey, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors. We have a moral responsibility to our investors and shareholders. And that's important as hell to me. That doesn't mean that the plan is not going to change or take a little bit longer to get to what we said we were going to do, but we know that that's a target for us. And so the fear that I have around that is a real one. And so I have to understand that, like, all businesses go through change and things don't happen as fast as you want. And it, you know, articulating that in an investor letter, I don't think is going to rub an investor the wrong way. I think it's going to say, hey, like, we're thinking, we're putting our best foot forward. We're doing our best to get to this place. And, you know, things didn't work out as fast as we thought they were. So we're slowing it down. So we're actually going to slow it down. So for me, instead of hitting that 5 million plus arena, like, I just have to be comfortable with less than that. And that's okay. it's totally okay because we did the math and we're going to be okay either way, right? And so I appreciate you bringing that up to me. I needed to get a little kick in the ass there so that I could just be cool. And but also, like, you know, when we're thinking about this sort of like org chart of the company, you know, I built out a sort of marketing department ideal plan, right? And I see it every single day on my whiteboard. I look at it every single day, and I would love nothing more than to accomplish it. But I know that, like, I have to just cool my jets.
Yeah.
But I know I do. I know I do because I've made some poor decisions over the last 3 years that we've been in business in hiring people because I thought they were great, but I didn't spend enough time doing the diligence. I mean, I think you know at this point, like, I'm the first to hold myself accountable for fucking up, you know? I'm not going to, like, get kicked in the teeth for every one of these decisions because the truth is that, like, sometimes things just don't work out for reasons that you could have never, ever seen. Right? But at the end of the day, we need to build a bigger team because we have high aspirations for the company. Yeah. And so that's what we're going to do. And it's probably not going to happen as fast as I'd like it to happen.
Yeah, but no one cares how you get to, let's just say 150, 200 million when you get there.
Right.
You know, like, it feels so material to us in the moment because, like, we are focused on those things and we are thinking about those things. And I think it's easy to get caught, something that we've talked about as well is, like, it's easy to get caught up in kind of leaning so heavily on analytical thinking versus intuition. And when you write an investor letter, or even, like, and I'm victim to it too, I literally started when we kicked off this podcast and I just threw out, like, numbers, right? Like, I was actually looking at those numbers earlier today and I was thinking how it's funny how over the course of time, if I just threw that in a chart, it's just, like, slowly up and to the right, you know? But, like, someone might not be impressed with 15% growth, but if it just keeps slow up and to the right, like, eventually you get somewhere pretty significant, right? It's like, it's exponential on itself. So I do think you end up still getting to the right place, and just, you know, doing this and having the conversations that we have, I think are the pulse check of, like, almost leaning into and out of intuition and analytics, because you kind of need both of those things in order to ultimately be successful.
And I think that is what you and I are.
Yeah.
Like, we complement each other super well there.
Totally.
Real quick, just housekeeping stuff that we're working on. So we're building a new website, or we're not building a brand new website, but we're updating our website. We're working on trying to figure out what our cart is going to look like and how the transaction on the website is actually going to be. We believe there's some efficiencies that we're leaving on the table there, and so basically we're deliberating whether having a full-on PDP product page or just a pop-up window that allows you to actually choose your flavors and transact in the cart right there on that homepage is what is sort of what we're toggling back and forth on. Some really cool updates on the website. It's not going to change aesthetically that much, but there's some cool design features that we're introducing that are pretty cool. I'm excited about. We're also deep in the throes of looking for a co-man for our protein bar right now, and that journey has been sort of like a slow slog. We thought we were dialed with a co-man, and in the 11th hour. Didn't happen, so we're out there still looking to connect with the right co-packer there. Formulation is 90% there. We're just probably maybe one iteration away from.
If it were up to me, it would be there.
If it was up to him, we would be there. Just a little caveat to that. There's 2 ingredients that I am on the fence about that I've just got to get comfortable with. One is glycerin, and another one is lecithin. So we've done away with lecithin, so the only thing that we're left with is glycerin. And I spoke to an advisor of ours who I deeply respect in the world of wellness, who had said to me, like, I've got no issue with glycerin. Yeah. And I think that she's got a really strong voice in the community of wellness at large, but also just, like, her deep wealth of knowledge really gave me some confidence that, like, glycerin is not as bad as I think it is. And so, it's not that it's going to be in the bar necessarily, but it could very well show up in the bar as an ingredient. So there's inulin, which is just a fiber, and there's glycerin that potentially will be on the bar that I would prefer to not have, but and similarly to Meal One, right? Like, we've done 3 versions of Meal One at this point, 3 full-on reformulations. So, anything that we put out is going to be fucking awesome. Trust me. I mean, I've been working on the bar R&D for, I don't know, 9-10 months.
Yeah, and it tastes amazing.
It tastes amazing, but you know, I'm a bit of a maniac when it comes to the R&D stuff, and so it's going to come out. It's going to be amazing regardless, and then chances are we're probably going to iterate on it over time. We had a good call with a co-man 2 days ago that it's, you know, he had mentioned a couple of different things, that he was like this double enrobement where you can enrobe it and then you can put protein puffs on it and then enrobe it again, and just kind of cool things, drizzle some stuff on it, you know, like be fun, right? We'll create something fun there. So we talked about website, we talked about the bar stuff. We are changing the name for Nightcap. We're changing it to Creatures Sleep. We decided to do that for a host of reasons. One being that we found out that there's another product on the market called Nightcap, and it is a sleep product, and we did not know about it when we did a trademark search. And so we found out about it, and instead of getting into it with somebody, we decided that we were just going to change the name to Creatures Sleep. We had thought about changing Meal 1 to Creatures Oats, and we decided against that for now anyway, but we will be changing Nightcap to Creatures Sleep. And there's another thing that we're thinking about doing with Nightcap, which will potentially come out on a down the road version, but adding CBN to Nightcap is something that we're discussing doing, because CBN is really effective in sleep, as well as glycine. So those two ingredients we're contemplating, you know, with a potential reformulation for Nightcap. It won't change the flavor, won't change the texture, but will potentially increase the qualitative sleep benefits of the product. What else?
For double subscriptions now, we swapped the journal with a pretty dope gold spoon with the KOH logo and no matter what on the handle. So anyone that's a new subscriber to 4 boxes will get that in their order. Previously, it was the journal, which we had around for a good amount of time, and thought that this was kind of a logical shift for us to just pair with the creature container. So
we've got a couple of cool, we're calling it the athletic capsule, where this hat, which is an all black on black Creatures of Habit performance hat. So the current Creatures of Habit hat will still be in the mix. We'll always have that hat. We'll always do cool colorways for that hat, because that is definitely a staple in the community of Creatures of Habit. Pretty much everybody who is a Creatures of Habit user has purchased one of those hats. Seen it all over, you know, the streets of New York and Hollywood. But this new hat is something that we're going to be launching, and it's going to be gifted out for the most part to subscribers after a certain period of time. But very cool hat, all black, performance. I've been wearing it, training pretty much every day for the last week, and it is sweat proof. Which is so cool, right? Because the current Creatures that have a hat, when you work out in it, it is not sweat proof. Yeah. And so you will develop some sweat lines in that hat. I've done it a zillion times. And so I'm excited to have this guy. We've made some cool socks that we're going to be introducing to the community as well, that are very cool, that are coming very soon within the next couple of weeks. So
the thing that I would add with those touch points, because like at one point I obviously had mixed feelings on merch from a business standpoint. And I think from our perspective, like when we're making all of this stuff, it really is, there's so many people that have been Creatures customers for a long time that like we want to have these things for, that are just like items that they can wear to be proud of. And the thing that I wanted to add with that is like, at the end of the day, yeah, we do have to think about the business component of it. But the more people that come into the brand, the more it gives us the autonomy to be creative. Right. And so one of the things that I don't know if we talked about it on the last episode, but it was something that I had voiced out to keep myself publicly accountable, and it ended up being delayed, is the referral program. Mm-hmm. And so right now, like any customers that are current customers, if they refer someone, it's that person gets $15 off and you get $15 off of your next purchase. And so I think it's a pretty generous program, and you know, by bringing in more people, it just allows us to do more things for the existing customers who are supporting a small business right now.
Totally. I think those touch points are things that people love, right? Mm-hmm. We also put stickers into the mix. I don't know if we talked about that on the last episode, but we made some really cool stickers. I've been seeing them up, which is very cool. If you do have stickers, and you want to, you know, take a picture of them, post about it, because they're cool.
I had a buddy send me a picture of, maybe it was a Subway in Williamsburg, of a sticker, and I was like, "Yep, I think Mike may have done that."
So, you know, back in the day, I was a graffiti writer, and you know, having these stickers in my bag at all times kind of brings me back to those days where I take a look to my left, I'll take a look to my right, I'll pull out a sticker and I'll slap it on a stop sign, is just fun for me. So I do that. I do that pretty much every time I'm down here in New York City. I make sure to have a handful of stickers on me to slap them on things. You know, New York City, I love you. Don't arrest me for that. I'll pull them all off if there's a cop listening and wants to call it in. And the Rich Roll podcast that came out, I do a deep dive on my story and how Creatures of Habit came to be. Honestly, I will say I'm not ashamed to say that I think it's a very good podcast. So if you have 2 hours and 53 minutes to spare and you want to check out my episode on the Rich Roll podcast, it is out. It came out a couple of weeks ago. I think that kind of wraps up where we're at right now.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I appreciate you, JY.
Likewise.
I really do. I love doing these podcasts. I think that it's just a great way for us to not only like share what we're doing, because I think taking the community on the journey with us is like, it's not something that you see happen all the time in this way. So I think the community appreciates it. I mean, honestly, like this series, I get more people responding to this than any other Creatures of Habit podcast.
Yeah. And it's not that different. I mean, our conversation here is not much different from the conversation we had over dinner last night.
It's the same conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
it's pretty
I took 24 hours to absorb it, and I was really excited to be able to come out here and talk about it. Like, I think sharing this is very powerful. It just is. Everybody gets to hear what we're going through. And the amount of people that have reached out to me after listening to this and saying, hey, like, I can help you with this. Can I help you with that? You know, everybody should know, like, I am a glutton for help. Like, I am down. I've got no problem asking for and receiving help. So if you're listening to this and you're like, maybe I can help these guys, like, do me a favor. Shoot me an email. Michael@creatureshabit.com, or DM me on Instagram, whatever. Like, I'm always looking for ways to be better, be more efficient, help the community experience our brand in a better way. So I guess that's it, man. Ladies and gents, once again, thank you. Thank you for listening to this Creatures of Habit, What's Really Happening episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed the conversation with my pal and partner, JY, Jonathan Yarmeisch, and share it with a friend. If you're in the industry or if you're an entrepreneur and this was interesting to you, share it with another friend in the industry or who's an entrepreneur or anyone really that you think would appreciate it, because it's a fun ride to be on with us. And we don't hold anything back here. We talk about everything that's happening. That's why it's called What's Really Happening. So give us a 5-star rating and review. That would make me so happy. Really, the podcast is growing, and it is growing because you guys are actually starting to write small reviews, which I'm very grateful for, and giving us 5-star ratings. So if you're listening to this, do me a favor. Stop what you're doing and just hop on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and just go to the Creatures of Habit podcast and then write a review, hit 5 stars, and then write "love these dudes" or something simple like that. Great podcast. Anything what really helps us build the podcast, because we love doing it, and we're going to do it no matter what, literally. But it would mean a lot to hear from you guys on that. And outside of that, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that I'm able to sit here and talk about a business that we created from zero, and we're now out there in the world, in the universe, and doing cool things. So thanks a bazillion. Thanks a patrillion. Until the next one, y'all. Peace.